I'm going to talk about a subject that is one most people would rather avoid. It's a subject that most people just like to complain about. And in fact, it's such a rare subject that people want to speak on that it wasn't even included on our poster. I'm sure it was an inadvertent oversight. Taxes are a responsibility that nobody can escape in our country. But unfortunately, many do. One of the Beatles' most obscure songs, and people who know me know I'm not a huge music fan, but I'm more jazz, but one of their most obscure songs was written by George Harrison and recorded in 1966, and it protested the progressive taxation in Great Britain. At that time, Great Britain's taxation structure was extremely progressive, very much like ours was in the years after World War II. And the Beatles had done a little pretty well. They were making good bucks. And Harrison was upset that they were up in the 90+% tax bracket in England. The song was called Taxman, and it reflects the opinion of most Americans today about taxes. If you drive a car, I'll tax the street. If you try to sit, I'll tax your seat. If you get too cold, I'll tax the heat. If you take a walk, I'll tax your feet. Taxman, well, I'm the taxman, yeah, I'm the taxman. But you know, many realistic Americans understand and appreciate the need and justness in paying taxes, particularly when they're not running for political office. While it is common to hear complaints about taxes, I think it is useful to recognize comments from a few notable Americans that are somewhat positive. The 16th Amendment, which you hear about so much by folks from the Tea Party, is the amendment that created the income tax in the United States. And during the discussion of the 16th Amendment, William Jennings Bryan, who was an early 20th century politician and a political orator of his time, spoke during that debate in favor of the income tax. I am in favor of an income tax. When a man who is not willing to bear his share of the burdens of government which protects him, I find him a man who is unworthy to enjoy the blessings of a government like ours. A little more recently, Dwight D. Eisenhower, former World War II general and former president, he spoke that every real American is proud to carry his share of the burden. I simply do not believe for 1 second that anyone privileged to live in this country wants someone else to pay his fair and just share of the cost of this government. Like Eisenhower, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes put it even simpler. I like to pay taxes. With them, I buy civilization. Personally, I am a progressive. I believe taxes are necessary to ensure that that as Americans we live in a country that helps us realize the goals and the principles of our Constitution, encapsulated primarily in the preamble, which I think are the most important words of that Constitution. I believe that the freedom is never free, and that this nation is built on the simple concept of community. Neighbors helping neighbors and gathering together to provide a better life for all. And that must contribute to the common good to the extent that we are all able. This isn't a new idea. This is an idea I believe was shared by the founders of this country. It was shared by the people who first immigrated to this country back before immigration was evil, who came here to start a new land and to escape what they thought was unfair and unjust where they came from. Taxes and tax policy has become a favorite target of politicians and voters alike. But you know, most of us will still tell a pollster that we support good schools, support libraries, a pet project of mine. We want well-maintained streets and roads. We want police and fire protection. We want trash pickup. We want safe drinking water. Our hatred of taxes or our desire to see someone else pay them reveals a huge disconnect between our expectations of what government will do for us and our sense of responsibility and personal obligation to the community at whole. My understanding of American history tells me that these were the motivations of our founding fathers. They formed this nation to escape political and economic repression of the British Empire that treated the American colonies as it did all their colonies, as a source of natural resources to plunder and a captive market for English goods. Our Constitution was originally ratified in 1788, and it was relatively vague on the matter of taxation. There were lots of discussion among the Founding Fathers and among the people of that day. And it is important to remember that in that time, in that place, in order to have a voice in that discussion, you couldn't be poor. The only people who participated in those discussions were the wealthy, the landowners, the businessmen, and the people of professions. Keeping that in mind, it's very important for us to realize as a people that they shared pretty much the same beliefs that I share today. The conflicting views on exactly how powerful the federal government needed to be, and therefore how many resources it would require, occupied much of the framers' discussion. And as is frequently pointed out by libertarians, the Constitution, as originally written, never envisioned an individual paying taxes directly to the federal government. As with so many other things, things change. And our Constitution was designed to accommodate that change. Colonists objected strongly to the English crown imposing taxes upon colonies without recourse. The rallying cry you're all familiar with of unhappy colonists was, "No taxation without representation." But you know, that's not to be confused, as many people do today, as a general opposition to taxation as a concept. This represented the view that government must operate under the consent of the governed and in the interest of the governed, and that includes both the role of government and how we fund it. Taxes are inescapable from any of us who want to look at government as a sacred responsibility and not just something that helps us out when we need it. This country's first Revenue Act was signed in July of 1789 by our first president, George Washington. In the discussion of that act, a Virginia congressman you may be familiar with, his name was James Madison, wrote, "A national revenue must be obtained, but the system must be such that while it secures the object of revenue, it shall not be oppressive to our constituents." How better put could you be about the values of our founding fathers and the importance of fairness in our taxation? The concept of fairness and taxes tied to one's ability to pay are nothing new. It occupied the minds and discussion of our nation's founders from the beginning. An historian or constitutional scholar would refer to this as originalism because it reflects the political thinking at that time that our Constitution was framed. That's an important way of looking at it when you think about how so many people today in the Tea Party movement and on the far right like to talk about the Constitution and the original intent.